Hey guys, I wanted to just let you know how I studied for the NASM-CPT exam because I was lucky to pass it the very first time that I took it. So one thing I just want to throw out there is that we are all starting with a different foundation. We all have different levels of experience and education, so that is something I really want to reiterate because asking people what they need to study and what they can skip, you might be able to skip some things or some chapters if you have previous knowledge or experience in that area. Otherwise, I would not recommend skipping anything out of this book because it is literally the least amount of information you can know to be in this field and be considered a professional. So I honestly, this was recommended to me and I thought it was hilarious because it was something I didn't want to do. But first things first, I'm going to go ahead and recommend that you read that NASM CPT textbook 2 times. Yeah, you can go ahead and start cursing at me right now because I didn't want to do it either. But that was something that really helped because even those first few chapters, the second time around, it made sense why we were doing the things we're doing and why the information that they're giving us is pertinent. So I know you don't want to do it, but I'm going to go ahead and recommend, again, that you read that book 2 times all the way through. It makes a lot more sense and it goes a lot faster that second time because you know the information coming. So what I did to study, I have these flashcards. You can also do this app called Pokemuscle, which is really fun. I had these flashcards here and I study better with tangible items, so I just use those, but the app is great and really fun, honestly, so I recommend that if you don't have physical flashcards. The other things that I did, I had 3 apps that I studied every day. I did pay for the Pocket Prep app for the last month before my test, and I also paid for the NASM Edge app the month before my test just so I could have full access to all those questions. And the other one that I studied from was the NASM-CPT. But yeah, just getting different kinds of questions thrown at you and different wording definitely helped understand the information that I was being asked instead of just memorizing what the answer was per question, because all of the questions are going to be different once you get into that testing area. Hearing a question in different ways is going to be super helpful, and just understanding why the answer is what it is going to be essential to getting that passing grade. And then another thing that I was doing every single day, I was listening to the NASM CPT podcast. They also have a chapter review, which is pretty much the bullet points in the end of the chapter, so I didn't really listen to those as much, but there is a CPT podcast that gives you basically the information. He goes through testing points, but it also expands on the information so you can understand why the answer is so. It kind of gives you just more of a description of how things work. And that seemed to help me a lot, just understanding why these answers were. It gave me the whole story instead of just, a sentence or two about it. And then other things that I did study, I did the underactive and overactive for all 3 of the distortions. So this is what I did basically here. I did all the muscles for overactive and all the muscles for underactive, and then I came up with these mnemonic devices here. And I did that for each distortion. And I also drew a picture of this little guy because that helped me see it in my mind when I was testing. So I did overactive and underactive, come up with a mnemonic device, house garage sale. That made sense in the way this came down. And you think when you're at a garage sale, oh, my back hurts, I don't want to stand here anymore. So just come up with a mnemonic device that makes sense for you, something that you're going to remember. It could be weird, it could be funny, it could make sense, it could make no sense. As long as you remember it, that's all that matters. And then I also did running mechanics. This might seem silly, but I actually got a question on this. You're gonna want to know what triple extension and triple flexion are. That was on my test as well. And then just kind of knowing like what the difference is in each phase of these running mechanics. Something else that I did write out that was on my test, I thought that was overkill. I did possible contraindications for flexibility. And then I also did the social support and types and how they are different. Benefits of group exercise. This was on there too. Basically anything that was in a chart. I took time to write it out myself because repetition helps me remember. And then the other thing that I did there is these behavior change techniques, and I was actually asked about these as well. So know which ones go with which, you know, which ones promote self-regulation. That was one of the ones that I got asked. And then another thing that I did do was, as I was studying, when I came to these tests and I was pretty unsure about the question, I wrote it down here and I went into the book and figured out what the difference was. And I'm going to give you one of these right here. One thing I super struggled with was the difference between agility and quickness. Like, why is this so confusing and hard? For me, it just didn't quite make sense. They seem to be close to the same thing. So I wrote these down, and this is how I separated them. Agility is acceleration, deceleration, and stabilization. Postural control, change of direction, and it involves sprinting and cutting. So basically just like a forward and back, a stop and go. And then quickness is max rate of force production. So putting that power into it, reaction time, so quickness. And then change of body position, where agility is change of direction. And then quickness is also in all planes of motion and from every body position, which is going to be like hitting a baseball, as opposed to agility is like cutting and sprinting. Quickness is like movement, changing the action of your body. So hitting a baseball is not going to be sprinting and cutting, running, stopping. That's how I kind of differentiated the two. That was hard for my brain to comprehend. So that's why I'm just throwing those specifics right in there. Hopefully that's not an issue for you, but if it is, I hope that helped. And if not, Uncle Google can help you out there too. I did a lot of Googling on stuff, so don't be shy to Google. One other thing on that, one thing that was confusing for me is pronation and supination. So know the difference on those. I did have a question on pronation, so do know what those are there. I did also write down all the acute variables, and when I did that, I also had an example from each phase. So here is the resistance training acute variables. Know these more than any of the other acute variables. But then on the back here, as you can see, I've separated them into stabilization, strength, and power. So you're going to want to know which exercises go with which phase in every single one of these acute variables. I also did your code of conduct. There's a lot of these. There's a lot. You need to know which ones belong to which section. Professionalism, business practices, confidentiality, or legal and ethical. You need to know which section these go in, and that was confusing for me. So just write them out. The OPT model, I wrote out this summary, and this was, again, another thing that I didn't expect to get asked on, but I did. One thing it asked me, core. You're going to want to know which primary adaptations you're looking for, and then also how to progress, because this was on my exam for sure. You need to know these things. Again, like I said, if it was in a chart in the book. I pretty much made myself a chart just to like get that information written down using my hand, and then seeing it again and then being able to study my own writing was really helpful. The last thing that I did do here was each phase in the training synopses, and then I did highlight the things that changed from phase to phase. And then also on this, phase 1, we focus on movement patterns. So I wrote out these movement patterns. The movements, what muscles are used, examples. And then phase 2. Phase 2, you're going to put together a strength exercise with a stabilization exercise. What do you know? There's examples in the book. Was it on the test? Sure was. Yeah, so that's it. That's everything I studied. I really hope this was helpful for you. I was able to watch some videos and get some feedback from people, and this seems to be everything that was on my test and theirs. So I really hope this was helpful for you. I hope you pass your CPT exam on the first try too, because it feels awesome, and I know you can.